what sets apart the ones that don't really bounce back from adversity and don't really have a high resilience in comparison to the ones that do? Like, what have you seen within your journey?
In all honesty, it's the parents. In all honesty, it's the parents that I rarely hear from are the ones that are the most resilient and bounce back from adversity, as opposed to the
Hmm.
parents that try and do everything for their 18 or 19-year-old son. It's amazing. You get emails, when is registration? Like from a parent. Your student should be knowing that. Your student should be the one, if they don't know, finding that answer out.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Mind Your Game podcast. I am your host, Dustin Donner, and today we have another special guest. I'd love to welcome Scott Larson, the athletic director of UTPB. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, for all of our listeners and our watchers on YouTube, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, your background, and what's led you to be the athletic director at UTPB?
Sure. It's when I first went to college, I really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I actually started college on a music scholarship of all things. And again, went as an undecided, really, again, had no idea. The University of Tulsa, where I did my undergrad, had a sports administration major. I thought that sounded cool. That you get paid to watch sports for a living. And of course, since found out that's a very small part of what I actually do on a day-to-day basis. But was an intern in the compliance office there, the athletic compliance office there. About the time I graduated, the individual I was working for got a job at Arizona State. He said, "Hey, why don't you come along, be my graduate assistant?" 21 years old, free graduate degree, Tempe, Arizona. Why not? Let's go do it.
Yeah.
So was out there for 3 years and then came up through the compliance ranks, moved to Lubbock Christian University in 2012. That's really when I went from Division I to Division II and really fell in love with the Division II level and what it stands for. About 7 years into my tenure there, our athletic director left. I got bumped up into the athletic director chair, was there for about 4 years. And then here at UTPB, I just made the trip a little bit south, wanted to get football back on my resume because that's a very kind of a big deal in our business. And so
Yeah.
been here for about 16 months or so.
Wow. So you've just been all over, maybe not geographically, but also at the same
Oh,
time.
geographically too.
Yeah. Arizona,
Geographically,
Texas.
Arizona, went from Arizona to the University of Wisconsin was my first full-time job. Then Gardner-Webb University in North Carolina, Northern Arizona, UTEP, USC Upstate in South Carolina, Lubbock Christian, and then now here in Odessa.
Just all over the place.
I got a patient wife.
So not only with having a patient wife and moving all over, it sounds like also that's part of the job as well, being an athletic director, kind of having your hand in all these different pots and mine going in all these different types of directions.
Yeah, I mean, the moving piece, it really slowed down once we started having children. Your priorities change a little bit once you start having kids. And we moved to Lubbock when our kids were, 6 and 4. And right now and we were blessed to live there for, 12 years and really raise our family there. And now we have, two boys that are 20 and 18. And so we were really blessed to remain in one spot when they were growing up. But yeah, it is part of the deal. And it really depends on your priorities. Before kids, I was chasing the dream. And then once, we had kids, it was more about, okay, this is a good place to raise a family and do all those things. And again, very blessed to do that in Lubbock. And then as they got older, it was like, okay, let's start thinking about career again. And thus the jump to UTPB with football.
Yeah. And something you said a little bit ago, when you were kind of explaining your background was Division II kind of holds a special place in your heart. What is it about Division II athletics that holds that place within you?
Well, I mean, I started in Division I, was in Division I for 15 years. And at that point, it was all, FBS or bust, Power Five at the time or bust. Just trying to climb as high and as far as possible. And then again, we had our oldest or our kids were 6 and 4 when I took the LCU job, and around that time, we weren't living near any family or anything like that. And as far as schooling for our kids and things, we were like, we want to get closer to family. It didn't really matter which one it was, whether mine or hers. Um, and the LCU job came open on the compliance side. They were transitioning from NAI to Division II. And having worked in Division I for, 15 years, it was a little bit of an ego check to
Hmm.
go to Division II. Because having worked in Division I, you kind of rightly or wrongly, you kind of poo-poo Division two, and it's something that's less than and things like that. But having been in it again for 13, 14 years now, it's something it's just different. Student athletes, Division one, and this is broad generalization, but everybody thinks they're going pro. It's a means to an end. It's stuff like that. Whereas at Division two, it's really more athletics is the means to graduate and get a degree. And things like that. And so the student athletes, it's just, and again, this may be altruistic, but it's more of what I believe college athletics to be about. But in this day and age, that's changed too with, transfer portal and NIL. So not just Division one, that's creeping into Division two. So a lot has changed since that time. But no, I really love the Division two and what it stands for.
Yeah. And it seems like, of course, maybe even a player, an athlete that gets bumped down from D1 to D2, right? It's kind of an ego check, or even these athletes that are at the Division 2, Division 3 level that are trying to get to the D1 level, it's even a bigger ego check once they get there. How do you feel
Yeah,
as though, go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say that, I really, use the term go down to Division two. And I try and refrain from doing that because it's not really going up or down. It's just a different model in
Mm,
reality. It's, Division one it's just different. The scholarship limits are higher. You play more games. Division two, you still have scholarships, just not as many. It's more regionally focused. And then Division three, there's no athletic scholarships. So it's really, it's, people use that term going up or down. And I try to use that it's different as opposed to, going up or down.
yeah, it's more like a lateral movement than like stairs, like going up or
Yeah,
down.
yeah, it's just different.
Do you feel as though with your approach to looking at it like that, where it's kind of a lateral movement, not this up and down, do you feel as though that's what you all try to engrave within your athletes as well that are at the school?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, I think, I say everybody, again, broad generalization, people have these dreams and aspirations of playing at Division one and playing in these arenas and stadiums in front of, 30, 40,000 people and all that, which I don't begrudge them for. And if we bring kids here and develop them and they have the opportunity to go do that and make some money, and I really don't begrudge them for doing that. But, our job, I think, is to create a culture and environment that they don't want to leave, to make it very hard for them to leave from that standpoint.
Mm.
Not necessarily, we can't compete with the dollars that, Big 12 schools are offering from an NIL standpoint and all that. But I really want to make it hard for student athletes to leave a culture and an environment that they really like and feel like they belong to.
How do you do that? What do you kind of imply and implement to create that culture?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. It's hard, it's not you don't break out the manual and you do this, but it's being around, it's being available, it's supporting student athletes. It's not, there's still accountability and all those kinds of things, but you have to show that people aren't, kids aren't stupid. They can tell if you really care and if you're genuine about caring and things like that. And so I think that's what you have to do, and we've tried to instill that in all of our staff. The wins and losses are great and they're a lot of fun, but 10, 15 years from now, when you reconnect or keep connecting with those student athletes, you're really not going to talk about or remember those wins and losses. It's going to be, those times on the bus when coach did something stupid, or when,
Mm.
I don't know, the plumbing didn't work in the bath, just those kind of fun things, or when they forgot our order at dinner one night, just those kinds of things, and how the coaches handled it and how the kids handled it. And so, like I said, the wins and losses are nice in the moment, but long term, those are the things that really matter, those relationships, those wedding announcements, those birth announcements. And, I've interviewed for AD jobs, and people ask, how do you judge the success or failure of your athletic department? And so I'm like, obviously in the short term, there's wins and losses, graduation rates, GPAs, all those metrics. But for me, it's a much longer term approach. It's 10 years from now, am I still getting texts or sending texts on people's birthdays, or getting those wedding announcements or birth announcements and those kinds of things? And I think
Mm.
for me, that's the culture you want to create.
I feel as though not a lot of athletic departments have that mindset going into creating a culture over wins and losses. I feel as though a lot of athletes I talk to, a lot of people within athletic departments, and of course, this is a generalized statement, but most of them, the first thing that they'll bring up when you ask how you're doing or how's the program doing, it's like, oh, we have X amount of wins, X amount of losses. But then you go down the
And I
road,
think,
like you were saying. Go ahead.
Well, I think, at the Division I level, there's so much, especially at the Power 5 level, there's so much money at stake with those wins and losses. So you almost have to be that way to sustain it and be successful and things like that. For us, again, I want to win because winning helps create, a healthy culture and things. But for us, you know, and I don't want to finish dead last, but finishing dead last versus winning the conference, there's not a lot of financial return either way
Mm.
with that. And again, winning is great because it's publicity and all those things. But I think if you have that culture and create that culture, that winning will take care of itself. If you take care of those baseline, fundamental, foundational things, the wins will come. And I think, you've seen that this year in our football program. Coach McCullers, this is his third year, and he's done that and built it every year. And I think you've seen that in that program, and our other programs are at different stages of that development. But I think that's going to come for all of our programs at some point.
Yeah. And I'm curious as we're talking about this, how do you all retain student athletes maybe when it is a rebuilding time, when it's all about culture and like you said it took 3 years to get to the football program to be where it is now. How do you all do that and how do you all instill that not only as athletic director but your coaches as well?
I think it goes back to what I said. It's hard in this day and age with the portal. Everybody sees the next best thing or thinks, hey, I can go there and get more playing time or more money, or I won't have to work as hard or whatever it is to do that. And I think it goes, it's like I said earlier, you may not be playing, but we're going to care about you a heck of a lot more than wherever you go next. You're going to be more than a student. You're going to be more than an athlete. You're a student. You're a person. You know, you talked about that's when people ask about success, that's usually the first thing that's brought up is wins and losses and that kind of thing. When I see our student athletes in the hallway, I try, it's like, I'll tell them, hey, good game this weekend or whatever it was. But I'm also going to say, hey, how was that chemistry test on Tuesday? How are your
Mm.
parents doing? That kind of thing. Asking those questions um, that I think help them to believe, and it's true, that I'm interested in them as a person and as a student, as opposed to just an athlete. The athlete is not who they are; it's something that they do.
Mm. Do you feel as though with all the experience that you have and maybe not other schools, but through stories and connecting with other people that you have ran into athletes necessarily identifying as just an athlete, like student athletes just saying my identity is an athlete and that's it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, a part of it is, like I said, I have a 20 and an 18-year-old, and they played travel baseball growing up and high school football and all that. And I think that's a challenge, even as a parent, to not have your identity wrapped up in that because, especially if you're in the club sports scene, travel baseball scene, you're practicing, 2, 3 nights a week, tournaments every weekend. And so it's hard for that not to become your identity.
Mm.
And so, like with our kids and even our student athletes here, obviously I don't spend nearly as much time with them, but it's, what you are more than a student athlete. Athletics is a means to an end for you in terms of getting a degree, developing life skills, those kinds of things to help you become better mother, fathers, community members, husbands, wives, all those kinds of things. Athletic, the wins and losses are going to fade at some point. I mean, they just do. I think about it again with my own kids when they were 8 or 9 years old. I felt like if they won their travel ball tournament weekend, that was the greatest thing ever. I can't even tell you. I mean, I can't tell you what happened in their travel ball tournaments 2 years ago. But at the time, it's like that's what you're all. But that's not the most important thing. It's
Mm.
great for, like I said, building, teamwork, camaraderie, those connections, all of those things. But it's something that you do and may help make you who you are, but it's not who you are.
Mm. How do you feel like having that approach helps the mental side of whatever sport the athlete's playing?
Well, I think it's very important because if, your basketball game, end of game, you're at the free throw line, no time on the clock, you got to make two to win the game. There's a lot more pressure in that situation if all you are is a basketball player.
Mm.
Because if you miss those two free throws, you're then a failure, right?
Mm.
And if basketball is just something that you do, well, there's a lot less pressure in making those free throws, so hopefully you make them. But if you miss them, you know what? You're still not a failure. You're still a good person. You're still a good human. You're still a good student. You're still a good boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. I just happened to miss a couple of free throws and we lost the game.
Mhm.
Whereas you still are who you are. You're and still a great human. You're not a failure at that point. Yeah, you miss the free throws, but you know what? Life goes on. That's part of it. And that helps you become, you know what? Maybe I'll become better in clutch moments later in life because of that.
Wow. So it's taking those quote unquote mistakes, as some people call it, or some student athletes would call it, and turn it into a learning opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, just because, a student athlete misses free throws at the end of the game doesn't mean I think any less of them. I hurt for them because they
Mhm.
miss those in those key moments. And I'm sure they feel terrible about it and everything too, but it doesn't make them a failure. Yes, they might have failed in that particular moment or not come through in that particular moment, but that has no impact on who they are. They're
Mm.
still who they are.
Where do you believe as a coach you start to instill that belief of what we're talking about when it comes to failures, losses, and missed opportunities?
Well, I think, at the collegiate level, it really depends on the student athlete and how they came up. Like if they came up in an environment, family environment, club environment, whatever it is, that you are a basketball player and that's who you are, that's how you're going to get far in life, then you're starting a few steps further backwards than if you have somebody who comes from a family environment that, yeah, sports are awesome and it's helped get you a scholarship and whatever else, but you're going to be successful no matter what you do because of those skills you learn. You're a lot farther ahead in that process. So I think that's the challenge for our coaches is because you have people from all backgrounds and all, different ways is to get those different backgrounds to mesh and play well as a team. Because if you have a player who's come up as, missing those free throws is life, and you have a player who missed those free throws, keeping that team cohesion of player X, not thinking this other player is a failure, but
Mm,
rather picking them up for then when the next time they're in that situation. So that's
mm,
the challenge for our coaches to do that. And it's not easy. And I feel the same way as an AD when we have, coaches that lose a game that perhaps they shouldn't, at least on paper, um, versus somebody who wins games that they probably shouldn't. I mean, I tend to spend more time with coaches that are struggling because when you're winning, you have more friends than you can handle
mhm.
at that point. So they don't need me around nearly as much. It's those that are struggling um, that need me around more. So you'll see me around coaches that are losing or are struggling than a lot more than you will those that are winning and having great success.
Mm. And it feels as though, especially at UTPB, you've created a culture that it's all about the support system, regardless of wins
That's
and
what we're trying to
losses.
do. Absolutely. I mean, we've got a great staff administratively who believes the same way, believes the same things, and so, um, yeah, absolutely. And I think the wins will come. I mean, this is a program we've had some intermittent success over the years, but I think the challenge is sustaining it. Um, and so that's where I think these foundational things come in because whenever my time here at UTPB is done, I hope that success keeps going. Is to build that culture so that no one person can really come in and destroy it. It's the culture is kicking that person out who doesn't necessarily buy in. And I think when I was at LCU, we had done a really good job of that, and we had, I made a mistake in hiring a coach, and that's an inexact science too. But made a coach who didn't really hired a coach who didn't really fit with our culture and things like that. And I saw it relatively soon. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? But in reality, I didn't have to do anything
Mm,
because the culture was strong enough. That coach realized after one season that they weren't really a fit and got themselves out. They weren't going to fit with everybody else who was there. So, and that's an advantage of creating that culture too, is that you don't necessarily have to run those people off; they'll run themselves off.
mm. If the culture is stronger enough, the ones that don't last will run off before you have to force them out.
Yeah.
And I feel like as an AD, there's a lot of pressure on hiring coaches, like kind of something that you just mentioned like a couple seconds ago of like making the quote unquote wrong hire or noticing right away a coach doesn't fit within the culture or the organization or the school. I'm wondering, how do you navigate that pressure in a position like yours?
I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, hiring is a very inexact science, for sure. I have a short list for all of our head coaches. So if they were to leave, I mean, a list of three, four, five folks that I'll reach out to that I know. to see if there's interest and maybe we can work something out, or if not, hopefully they know somebody who might be interested because they know me and they would know this other person, and we could get that done. But I mean, it's a challenge. It's inexact. I mean, whether it's a, 45-minute or an hour Zoom call and then they come on campus for a day, you can pretend to be anybody,
Mm.
for that short a period of time.
Yeah.
And so you try and you have them meet with as many people as possible. You make phone calls, references, try and get a gauge on, their experiences at other institutions. But at the end of the day, it's really an inexact science. You try and do your homework best you can. And the longer I'm here, the longer our coach is here, the stronger the culture gets. When they do come on campus, everybody will be able to sniff out those things, I think, a little better and a little sooner. Um, as the culture gets stronger. But again, it's an inexact science, and you do the best you can with what you got. And it's really the important thing is, are these coaches going to take care of our student athletes and do what they need to do? Again, that doesn't say no accountability. We're still going to hold student athletes accountable, whether it's, socially, academically, all those kinds of things. But we do need to take care of our student athletes because really we're effectively their parents for 4 or 5 years. Their parents are entrusting us to care for them, and that's our job.
And I'm curious, a word that you've mentioned since we started the podcast today was like accountability, especially within student athletes and holding them to accountable to a certain level of degree. With this day of age, I feel as though the world's kind of, oh, let's point fingers at someone else, not take accountability. And it's real quick. And a lot of the athletes that I speak to, that's kind of the first response that they have until we work through it. How do you all navigate that with like a new student that's a 17, 18-year-old freshman?
Well, I mean, you set those standards early. I mean, with all, when I first got here, we set some standards as a department. This is who we are. This is who we're going to be. This is who we want to be, how we want to be perceived in the community. And our coaches do the same thing within their programs. And so setting those standards right out of the gate is important.
Mm.
So they know what, even in the recruiting process, so they know what they're signing up for when they join a team. And if you're not going to abide by these standards, adhere to these standards, believe in these standards, then this may not be the place for you. And that's why it's important to communicate that early, because, we're recruiting them just as much as they're recruiting us in the recruiting process. It's like the same thing with a job interview.
Yeah.
The candidates interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them, and we want it to be a good fit, because the earlier you can determine if it's not going to be a good fit, the better off everybody is. Because, when coaching the recruiting process, all right, here are the standards in our program. Student athlete says, yeah, I don't know if I can do all that. Then, all right, let's move on, because if you come, it's going to be, button heads from day one, and that's not going to be good for either one of us. And then
Yeah.
more stuff ends up on my desk, and I don't want to deal with that either. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's setting those standards early. And I use that term, I'd say it a lot because, sometimes when I say, we need to take care of our student athletes and give them what they need, sometimes people take that to mean people can do just whatever they want and we're going to allow them to do whatever they want. But that's not the case at all. We need to take care of them, but there's a framework to that as well.
Yeah. And with you saying that about like accountability, setting the standard from then on, with all the experience that you have, what have you seen from student athletes that are either true freshmen transferring to a new school? What sets apart the ones that don't really bounce back from adversity and don't really have a high resilience in comparison to the ones that do? Like, what have you seen within your journey? This episode of the Mind Your Game podcast is brought to you by Caddy Snacks, the perfect fuel for golfers who want to perform at their best on and off the course. Made with clean ingredients and designed for long-lasting energy, Caddy Snacks keeps you focused from the first tee to the final putt. And with our code MIND20, you can get 20% off your first order. Grab your next round of Caddy Snacks at www.eatcaddysnacks.com. Now back to the podcast.
In all honesty, it's the parents. In all honesty, it's the parents that I rarely hear from are the ones that are the most resilient and bounce back from adversity, as opposed to the parents that try and do everything for their 18 or 19-year-old son. It's amazing. You get emails, when is registration? Like from a parent, Your student should be knowing that. Your student should be the one, if they don't know, finding that answer out.
Yeah.
It's those that I mean, the term helicopter parents, those that have the helicopter parents that I think struggle with it the most because they're not forced to do things on their own and figure things out on their own. And again, it's nothing bad. Like, if a student is really struggling with their mental health and things like that, then yes, absolutely parents should be involved. But
Mhm.
if it's, when is registration for next semester? That's something the student should be taking care of and taking initiative to figure that out. And really
Accountability.
accountability. I mean, that's the honest answer. And a lot of people don't like to say it or hear it, but that's the answer.
So with your answer being parents, and I always talk to my athletes always about what's in their control, what's outside of their control. No one can really control who their parent is, their parenting style, or
Right.
anything like that. What would be your piece of advice for those middle school, high school athletes that are like, hey, I want to go to the next level, but I do have maybe a helicopter parent or a parent that doesn't really let them have any autonomy? What would be your piece of advice to them?
I think to have a conversation with your parents. Say, listen, I know y'all love me. I know y'all want the best for me, but let me handle my recruiting process. Let me send the emails. I mean, there's a really good book out there. Um, what is the name of it? Looking for a Full Ride, I think is the name of it.
Okay.
That is a really good outline of how to do the recruiting process. And it's explicit in there. Coaches don't want to hear from parents in the recruiting process. They don't want an email. Hey, my son is a 6'5" forward, scores other. The coaches don't want to hear. They want to hear from the student.
Mm,
Um, and in doing so, as a student, then it's also your responsibility, and you need to be accountable for changing the head coach's name in the, dear coach so and so. I'm really interested in XYZ University. You need to change that to ABC University when you change that. Taking some ownership in that process, because when coaches get emails that come to their email but are addressed to a different coach in the conference or
mm,
whatever, those get deleted because they're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, which you may be doing, which is fine, but you need to make sure that everything's addressed appropriately and you at least appear to have an interest in the institution that you're going to. But I think that's a conversation students need to have with their parents. Listen, let me take control of my recruiting process. I'm the one who wants to go play at the next level. For a lot of parents, and again, broad generalization, for
of
parents,
course.
it's their dream for their student to go play at the next level.
Mm,
It needs to be the student athlete's dream or goal to go play at the next level and let them take initiative in that recruiting process. I know some people have an email account that's strictly for recruiting that both parents and student have access to. So parents can just monitor and see what's going on and be good parents and kind of oversee what's going on. But their student is the one that's taking the initiative as far as emailing, responding to emails, taking care of tasks that coaches ask them to do. Um, so I think that's a way a parent can still be involved, but not actually doing what needs to be done.
yeah. And having that conversation with their parent to then empower their own selves. And it also sounds like it would build the confidence within them too, not only to reach out to coaches,
Absolutely.
but once they get on campus and go on recruiting trips and such.
Absolutely. I mean, parents do need to be a part because they want to make sure their kid's going to be with somebody who's going to keep them safe and, be a de facto parent when they're not there, however many hours from home they're going to be. But the student needs to take the initiative in that. And the parent can set some guardrails and say, okay, I know I can only afford to send you to an in-state school. Let's focus it here, or it has to be a public school or a private school, or you can set those sort of guardrails for your child.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, let the child take the initiative or the student take the initiative in that recruiting process.
Yeah. And I'm curious with all how I like to kind of wrap up every podcast is kind of ask like one big question, one overarching question. And you have so much experience within athletics, athletic departments, almost every single level, geographically everywhere. What is one thing that you have learned working within athletics that has helped you out within life?
I think, I think really not to take things too personally. Um, athletics, my wife, again, very grateful for her support over the years, but athletics isn't really a job, it's a lifestyle.
Mm,
It's, 24/7, 365. Phone calls, texts, things go wrong, things happen. all the time. And so when things do go wrong, the coach makes a mistake, something negative happens to a student athlete, coach gets mad at me for whatever reason, it's hard not to take that home because you invest so much blood, sweat, and tears, so much time in trying to make the department better, everybody's, the culture better, all those things better. So when things go wrong, you tend to take that personally, even though it probably isn't any fault of your own.
Yeah.
It's hard not to take that personally. I think that's one thing that I've gotten a lot better at over the years is learning to, even if I am doing stuff at home, I don't bring it home with me, in terms of dealing with my family and things like that. So I think that's one thing I've gotten. I think that's what it's taught me. One thing that it's taught me over the years is you can't do that. Otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy and kill yourself. I mean, not literally, of course, but just kill yourself just thinking about that stuff and replaying scenarios and that kind of stuff in your mind.
Yeah, and just having all those kind of overthinking thoughts just going all over the place. And I'm
What could I
wondering,
have done differently? How could I have handled this differently? All those kinds of things,
is there anything that you do that does help you leave work at work so you don't bring it home with you?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I've one thing, and this is probably showing my age a little bit, but I try as much as possible to go on a 2 to 3 mile walk every night. Listen to a podcast, do something just to kind of separate for that hour or so that I'm out there, and then that kind of clears my head a little bit and allows me to refocus on family or cooking dinner or whatever the case may be at home. And again, so then when the phone does ring at 9 o'clock with something, then it's not as big of a deal. And I think, with our coaches too, and I think everybody's a pretty good job of this, telling them to be respectful of everybody's time either. And we've kind of adopted the philosophy of, okay, an email, it's really not that important. It's just getting it off my desk and onto yours. If it's a text, it's pretty important. It needs to be responded to. And then a phone call is uber important, something that's uber. So I think, with our staff, we've kind of unofficially adopted those rules. So, I try not to check my email all the time because it drives my wife crazy when I'm on my phone all the time. So that stuff usually waits. If it's a text, it's usually responded to relatively quickly. And the phone calls are usually taken immediately because those are typically the most important things to deal with. So I think that's kind of how you can manage that in terms, again, it's not an official policy we have or anything like that, but it's sort of an unofficial, unwritten rules that we have in our department.
And communication is key no matter what organization or athletic department you're a part of. And it sounds like you said, it's not written in a bylaws or guidelines somewhere, but it's something that you all know of, holding each other accountable again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, another thing, you talk about building culture, it's letting people into your personal life a little bit too. Like we'll have, 3, 4 times a year, we'll have, everybody over to the house for a cookout, and, we'll do that for the holidays coming up. And, just having people getting together where we're not talking about budgets or the transfer portal or NIL. And, we had a staff meeting this morning and we just, on a whim, did 2 truths and a lie. And everybody learned a lot of stuff about each other this morning in our staff meeting. I learned a lot about our staff, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do. So I know a lot of things about people, and, it was just, you get to know each other a little bit, and you just relate to each other better when you know more about each other.
Yeah. And sometimes at work, you can't just be human, and having the 2 truths and a lie, it kind of lets people be vulnerable, open, and be themselves and see them as a human being, not as a coach or athletic director or whatever their title may be at work.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
That's awesome, Scott. Well, I've of course been to a couple games. I've seen the culture that you're building over at UTPB, and I always appreciate when you invite me over and my girlfriend and getting to see the atmosphere. It's been amazing.
Well, you're welcome anytime. Football season's about over. Feel free to come to basketball and baseball and softball and all the things.
Yes, sir. Sounds like a plan. Well, for all of the listeners and watchers out there, thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Mind Your Game podcast with myself, Dustin Donner, and our special guest, Scott Larson. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you all next time.